What AI is doing is it's literally compressing the time to delivery even more than that. So like you said, I can literally have a discussion with a customer and within 30 minutes or an hour have an output ready to email that would have taken me maybe a week prior.
Welcome and thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got Barry Rosen, who is the principal at WSI. And the whole thing that we're going to be doing in these series is interviewing tech innovators from the advent of the PC through cloud computing, social media, and people who are still building in the age of AI today. So that's what we're going to unpack and explore. So thank you, Barry, so much for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. Really appreciate it.
Cool. So, Barry, like I said, principal at WSI, tell us about a little bit about what you're working on today before we jump into the products that you've worked on in the past.
Absolutely. So, WSI, we are a full service digital marketing agency here in Houston, Texas. We serve anywhere in the globe since we are digital. And so, we've also been leaning into AI. And so, we are fully AI enabled as an agency. And I also offer a AI consulting service based on my background, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. But I like to go in and help businesses grow. And so one of the things that we've noticed is that there are a lot of businesses that are curious about AI, but just don't know where to get started, especially in the medium to smaller size. There's a lot of big players out there like PwC and McKinsey and all of those folks that are helping the enterprise, but there's definitely a space that can benefit from this revolution, and we're here to help.
Cool. So, the reason I wanted to have you on is we were talking, and we were talking kind of as peers working in the AI space. But you were telling me a little bit about your history, and as someone that has led and worked on the Lotus Notes project,
Yeah.
which, if you're not familiar, historically is a pretty famous product going back many years. And so I wanted to start there and kind of unpack. Tell me, and for the listeners, what is Lotus? What is Lotus Notes? And give us
Yeah.
some context around this to set the stage a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm dating myself, but definitely Lotus Notes is a historical, I would consider it a historical product in the software space. It is actually still around. A company called HCL bought the IP from IBM, who bought the IP from Lotus back in the day. And so they're actually releasing version 14.5. So Lotus Notes, what is it? It's really cool. It started as a groupware collaboration type of product. Think about what Teams does today. That's kind of what Lotus Notes was trying to solve literally 30, 35 years ago. So it combined email calendaring, but using the Lotus 123 at language from spreadsheets. It positioned itself as a low code platform as well. Really kind of the original citizen developer type of platform. If you think about it, 30 years ago, everything was paper based. If you had a process in your office and you had to request a vacation, you had to put in a request to your manager, and that would probably be a paper, and they had to put it to HR, and then they would sign it and then send it back to your manager for approval. Well, what Lotus did is it made a simple workflow methodology where you could create those workflow applications very easily. So it allowed someone who was understood, maybe like a power spreadsheet user who understood at language, could create very simple workflow applications. So single source of truth, instead of sending around an Excel spreadsheet, you had a database, a central repository that stored the data. And then you had a front end on that with forms and fields and very secure. That was one of the other differentiators with Lotus, and a lot of government agencies used Lotus Notes for a long
Mhm.
time as well because of the encryption and the security features and functionality of it. It's one of those products where it's kind of it's a Swiss Army knife. It can do anything, but it's not like the best at all of the above. And that was kind of one of the best things and the worst things about it as well. I always hesitate to tell people that I worked on Lotus Notes because they either loved it or they hate it. I actually, um, before we got connected, I was at the Ion in Houston and I was talking to a gentleman and mentioned Lotus Notes. And he goes, "Oh, that was forced upon me." And that was a literal quote. So obviously, he did not have a kind opinion of that software, but it's definitely legendary in terms of its history, and it's gone through many transformations. Um, starting as kind of a model where it's a server client type of model, and it had like replication. So before the internet was wide and people were using dial-up modems, you would have a local encrypted database, and you could go on your sales
Mhm.
calls. And then when you went to the hotel at night, you'd plug in your computer and you would sync your data with the data in your hometown location or your headquarters, so that then by the next morning all the reps had the most recent data in terms of inventory and sales. That was one of the selling points as
Mhm.
well. The other use case we were used by the Navy because they could put servers on the subs and they could go offline and then come back up and resync with satellites. So we called it notes on boats um, for the Navy.
That's so cool. So
Yeah.
it sounds like, and just to put it in historical context, my understanding is Lotus, the original Lotus is actually a precursor to Excel. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Yeah. So Lotus 123 was a spreadsheet program.
Hmm.
So exactly, precursor to Excel, and then that they grew their business beyond the spreadsheet because they saw like, okay, spreadsheets definitely have their use cases, but in a collaborative setting, if everyone has a local copy of a spreadsheet and they're working off that local copy, then how do you combine that data? How do you have a
Hmm.
single source of truth if everyone is working off of a local copy? So that was kind of the idea
Cool.
behind the growth of that, and then using the at language, for formula language of computing in sales and translating that to writing programs and software using at and formula language.
Hmm.
So if you understood spreadsheets, you could write a very simple Lotus Notes application. And think about it like it's the same thing. It has fields and columns, and the difference is that they're security. So you could put a lot of security behind it. You can say only the following people have access to this database, and then you have field level security that has okay only. So for example, in the example that I gave of a manager approving HR for a vacation, you could have the manager can see every employee's entries, but the employees can only see their own in the database. So it's highly
Sure.
secure in that respect. So they have access to the database, but they can only see the content that they've created and not everyone's, versus the manager has access to everybody's. And then you can get very granular and have field level access as well. So only certain people
Yeah.
can read, write, or see fields as well.
So in some sense, I feel like this is really, what the platform developed into is a precursor to the whole Google suite, business suite of applications, right? Where you've
Yeah,
got
and that's kind of
Google
where I use
Forms,
that.
you've got Google Docs, Google Sheets. Yeah.
And that's where I use that Teams analogy. It's hard to kind of, it was the idea is it's a
Mhm.
collaborative platform where you have email, calendaring, chat. So before video, it was instant
Mhm.
messaging chat. So think like AOL instant messaging, like
Mhm.
that style, or Slack, right? Or like a Slack type of,
Sure.
and it was all combined in a single workspace. So you didn't have to have multiple solutions. So today, as a modern provider, you have all of those functions, but they may be provided by different companies or different stacks in the cloud, and they're separate apps on your desktop. The idea with this was a single pane of glass
Mhm.
where you can do everything and never have to leave. So you don't have to switch context constantly. You get an instant
Okay.
message, it's in the same app that
Mhm.
you're doing email. You get an email, you can click on the subject and talk to that person directly from the email. You can open an application and chat within the application as well. Like all of that was designed to keep you very collaborative. The idea was to collaborate,
Hmm.
but securely as well. So that's kind of the way I look at it. So like a team space where you have data, you can share documents, you can co-create, you can
Hmm.
co-edit, you can talk, you can chat, but you've also got your
Hmm.
email and workflow applications in there as well.
So tell me, I'm curious. I was thinking about this. How did you actually purchase and get onboarded to these early versions of Lotus? Was this all cloud, or
Yeah.
get it buy a CD-ROM
Yeah.
from Best Buy or Circuit City?
Go back. You're talking disks. You're talking floppy disks. So it started in floppy disks. So
Yeah.
I started in Lotus in probably 1999. And my background, I actually studied film. So I went to UT and got a degree in RTF, radio, television, film. I wanted to direct
Mhm.
and edit. I was really proficient on the Mac and was editing
Mhm.
using Avid software on the Mac at that time. I got a job at Apple. At that time, Steve Jobs was not in charge. I had a friend at IBM. IBM was the owner of
Mhm.
Lotus, had bought Lotus. My friends had come to IBM. They're a real company. Apple's going nowhere. This was right before Steve Jobs came back. So we're talking, this is 30
Yeah.
something, 20 something years ago. So yeah, the software was distributed originally on disks. Then we went to CD-ROM. So it was an IBM product.
Mhm.
So you would go on IBM's website and you would order the physical product, and they would literally ship you a CD-ROM. I think version 5 in 2000 was a CD-ROM, and when you put the CD-ROM in, it played music like a little bit. They had an ad campaign on TV called Superhuman with Dennis Leary. You can
Mm.
Google it. There's YouTube of it. So Dennis Leary was talking about Lotus in like early 2000. And so when you put in the CD-ROM, it played like a 30-second clip from the music from the commercial. So they were really fancy at that time.
Wow, that's super cool, and I
Yeah.
think it's something that's really taken for granted today because today you find something on Google, you click, you're 3 clicks in, and you're using the application. But even just the idea of a gap in time between making a purchasing decision and when it's going to arrive at my doorstep, and then actually physically distribute it to my team, it sounds totally different. Did you have, onboarding teams that were manually helping people get started, or was
Yeah.
it kind of just like a software walkthrough
No,
type
so
of
what?
deal?
So this is a very complex enterprise level software. So we had services, and
Mm.
we also had like adoption teams as well. So typically, this was not like a mom and pop type of thing. Our first customer was what was the name of? I think it was the PNC. I think was the first customer. They
Mhm.
bought 10,000 seats. PwC. So think about like accounting firms and large enterprises, with probably 5,000 seats. So they needed people to come in, install the software, set it up, and then we would teach them to administer. There was certification around the administration. There was certification around
Mhm.
development. So you had a IDE. If you were a developer, it had a custom IDE to create the apps as it got more mature as a product.
Mhm.
And Yeah, so I mean, think about like at that time, agile was not a concept. The cloud was not a concept. So you were developing your software cycle was annual because you had to physically
Wow.
package something to ship it physically, put it on a CD. You had to
Mm.
test it. And at IBM, everything was in multiple languages as well. So like everything had so and then they would do drops. So they would do drop one was English, French, Spanish, 8 languages. Drop two would be, the next language pack. And
Yeah.
then they do drop, it was all very complex, very planned out, very orchestrated. It took large teams to do it because you had QA teams, you had the teams that were doing the actual creation of the software, the distribution, the shipping, all of that. And then you had, then of course the cloud comes, and shifted everything. And now you can distribute software, like you said, you can have free trials, you can have
Mm,
demos in the cloud. So yeah, I
yeah.
mean that, that completely shifted the model. So and now today they sell it still both ways, because the reason is think about what's going on in the world today with cloud. If you're an enterprise and you have your data in the cloud, let's say you choose Microsoft, if something happens, the US government can go to Microsoft and say, hey, we need the data of that company, and Microsoft has to comply. And if you're an international company, you have GDPR, or you have local rules around data currency, residency, and all of that.
Mhm.
So in a way, things have cycled back, talking about like shifts in technology. Just because the technology exists to have something in the cloud, some companies choose not
Mhm.
to, and some governments choose not to, because their only option is to use a foreign government to host their data. And that is not an option for a foreign government. So they want local sovereign
Sure.
data residency, essentially. Now, of course, when
That's
I
so
was there,
fascinating.
we modernized it and we made it so you can put it, so you can put it in a container, you can containerize it. And so you can have it in a data center, but it can be your local data center, or it can be in Google, or it can be in AWS or wherever.
Sure.
It's an instance of Domino running in a container, depending on,
Got it.
Docker or whatever technology you want. So,
And I think going through this process is so interesting because, in some sense, so much of this is still here today. If you were to buy a Salesforce a subscription or license for your entire team, you're still going to have the adoption teams. You're not catching, 10,000 CD-ROMs in the mail, but it's almost identical. And what's crazy, I think, or maybe the biggest change, and you tell me, is it seems like the development life cycle, right?
yeah.
Instead of that annual, we can only do so much. We have to do so much testing. Now we've got cars driving around that get updates, know,
Yeah.
over the air. It's really incredible.
Yeah, when we were doing the annual release, we had to work backwards, because it's like, okay, how much time do we need to do our testing, to do our
Mm,
translations? So here's our deadline. Now, we worked agile within that period, because it was like, here are the things that we're working on and that we want to release in this release, and here's what we've defined as our priorities.
mhm,
But we only have a finite time, and then obviously whatever doesn't make it goes into the next version. But now it's just literally, you can release 10 times a day.
mhm.
Like, I worked at a cloud company where they were
Yeah.
releasing 10 times a day. They were making updates 10 times a day, which is amazing. That's like that's really the way you want to do it, because then you can meet your market much quicker. Right. And that's really what it comes down to, is like,
Mhm.
and I think that's the problem with those type of old products, is that, the changes and the adjustments, it's like steering the Titanic. So yeah, we could make an adjustment, but if we wanted
Mhm.
to do something, it would take a year or 6 months to get it out in the market at that point, right? And then maybe the market has changed. So
Yeah, and that's what I want to explore a little bit is, like I said, you're working in AI today, you're an AI first company and agency. So, how has your mindset
mm,
changed, and compare and contrast that planning process where it seems, almost rigid, almost more like military strategic planning, to today, boots on the ground,
yeah.
where, you might get a piece of feedback from a customer this afternoon, and by the end of the week, the fix has been pushed.
Yes. Well, you're adding much more value much quicker. I mean, I learned so much at IBM with their processes, and the good thing is I got to travel. The good thing about Lotus Notes is it's a global product and it's not industry specific. So I literally got to
Mhm.
travel around the world and speak to customers across industry of various sizes, governments, private agencies, local governments, school districts, you name it. I probably spoke to a customer in that space. So that kind of really honed my ability to understand what customers need. And now with the tools, I can just deliver it much faster. I mean, what AI is doing is it's literally compressing the time to delivery even more than that. So, like you said, I can
Mhm.
literally have a discussion with a customer and within 30 minutes or an hour have an output ready to email that would have taken me maybe a week prior. So, for example, as a marketing agent, and also in my former position, I was a product manager, and that's what I was doing for Lotus Notes at a global level. You're trying to look at roadmaps and you're trying to identify who your ideal customer persona is. Who are you targeting with your product?
Mm-hmm.
Who and at Notes and Domino, we had two personas or multiple personas because we had the administrator, who was a person who was like
Mm-hmm.
making sure that the platform was running, making sure that email was
Mm-hmm.
flowing, registering users, onboarding users, deleting users, renaming users, all of the things that you would do with an
Yeah.
Active Directory. We had the developer who was developing applications, who was using an IDE. So that was another persona that we were targeting. And then we had the end user who was using the client, who was looking at their mail, who was looking at their calendar, who wanted to do things on mobile, right? And wanted to do things offline and things like that. So we had a bunch of different personas. But here at WSI, I have a tool where I can have an interview with a customer. I'll record it with my AI assistant. I'll take the transcript and then I'll put it into the tool, and it will output a fully generated ICP, ideal customer persona report
Mm-hmm.
in a PDF format. Obviously, I'm looking at it, I'm reading it. I'm not just turning that over. I'm the human in the loop. There always has to be that human in the loop to make sure that the output is correct. There's no hallucinations. I'm modifying it. I'm adding to it. But that's something that like would have taken me a full day to do. I can now do in 30
Cool.
seconds. And then I can focus on the high value things for my customer rather than just researching and generating reports. So that's where the AI tools come in really handy. And another use case that I love, and I use this all the time. So I have my Read AI assistant in all of my meetings. I take the transcript from all of my sales calls and I've created a custom GPT, and I'm that is an expert sales coach, and I put all of my transcripts in there. I'm like, give me feedback. What did I do well? What did I not
Mm.
do well? And then give me actionable steps that I can use to improve my process and my sales flow. And so I've gotten
Mm-hmm.
some really amazing feedback. And then over time, it can see blind spots because I've done it so many times. So I'm like, all right, what are the areas that I'm doing repeatedly? Like, what am I doing on like that?
Yeah.
So, and then I have a cheat sheet so that when I go into my sales calls, I can remind myself on the things that I need to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And like, hey, Barry, for example, one of the blind spots that it said is like, you've really got to bring the emotion, because I'm a very technical person, you can tell. And so it's like bring more emotion. So it's like
Sure.
connect the business to the pain. So like ask them like, if you don't do this, what would your
Mm-hmm.
business look like in a year? If we don't do this, or if we do,
Mm-hmm.
what were the results? How would your business grow if we go forward with this, right? So they can kind of
Mm-hmm.
imagine and put some
Yeah.
emotion with a technical process. So that's kind of my weak point, but it's just amazing some of the output and help that it's given me.
So it seems like you're taking a lot of what you learned and did at Lotus Notes in terms of workflows and doing it today with AI. And I want to build on that in terms of the idea of no code tools in the past
Yeah.
and today, and the concept of citizen development. Walk us through a little bit of the idea of citizen development, where it started, with Lotus Notes, and how you have
Yeah.
seen it progress over time.
Yeah, I think to me, obviously AI is disrupting everything and touching everything. Low code is one of those areas where it's just mind boggling. So, back to the beginning, like I said, if you think about originally, let's say in a business, you had a spreadsheet for a process for ordering employees a new computer. And the
Mm-hmm.
way that this was done is you sent an email, and the email had the laptop information. It's like the employee name, their serial number, their current laptop, and then it had
Mm-hmm.
a column, do you need a new laptop, yes or no? And you would send that around through email, and then you'd send it back to procurement, and then they'd have the spreadsheet, and they'd do their process off the spreadsheet. Well, now with Lotus Notes, it gave the person who was closest to that business problem the ability to
Mm-hmm.
create the solution. And what would happen is sometimes these were crap. Sometimes these applications were pure crap. But sometimes, like a viral post on TikTok, they would catch fire and someone would say, wow, you know what? You solved that problem. And that's something that I can use in the enterprise. And instead of just being a departmental solution, we can turn that into like an enterprise level app. We can take a professional developer and augment what you've started as this low code, simple thing. And we can make it enterprise ready
Mhm.
and make it valuable to the entire enterprise. So that's what's kind of cool about that kind of low code kind of ethos, is when you have the person who is closest to the problem solving it. Sometimes they can come up with some brilliant solutions. And then what if you have someone with a little bit of skill can take that and then push that over the edge and then make that like an enterprise ready app. And sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes it's fine to just leave it as a departmental, who wants this for lunch? You know what I'm saying? Like a lunch taking
Yeah.
type of app or something like that. And
Mhm.
nobody else cares about it. But it solved your problem and you did it in an efficient way, and people are happy with it. So that's kind of the idea with the low code. Now, today, it's so interesting. It started a little bit with like, okay, you can use AI to review code. And I actually saw an article yesterday where they used AI to find a vulnerability in Linux, and they fed it like, here's the
Mhm.
past bugs, and look for patterns in the
Mhm.
code. And this is something that like just
Ah.
go for days, 8 hours straight. It can look at code, millions of lines of code, look for patterns, and it
Mhm.
found a bug before anyone else found it publicly, and then they announced it
Wow.
and they fixed it. So this was just announced this week. I think you can Google that. So, I mean, that's an amazing application. But think about that from a creation of code perspective and a creation of applications. You can create an application off of a prompt, off of a single prompt. The other thing that's
Mhm.
kind of cool that I've seen is, you think about like the visual aspect. If we take away the prompting from a typing perspective and you bring in the camera, let's say you're whiteboarding a solution, and you're drawing out a flow, right? Take a picture of
Mhm.
that, build an app off of that, right? And you said,
Mhm.
here's the flow, here's the landing page. User's going to land here. Here's what the landing page is going to look like. They'll fill out a form. It'll go here. Here's the flow. So now you're getting a little bit more complex, but all you had to do was
Mhm.
literally draw something on a whiteboard, right? Think about it,
Yeah.
brainstorm. We all do this. We have fun with whiteboards, and we all take a picture of it when we're done because we don't want to forget it. But now you can upload that into a tool that will now create the app that you just whiteboarded for fun, or for, brainstorm.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets exciting with the low code. Now, you know, and as it gets better and better, the output's going to get better and better as well. Now, there will still need to be people that will need to integrate that into a secure
Mhm.
enterprise setting, because otherwise you're dealing with the Wild West. I mean, imagine being IT department in an enterprise today, and
Oh
like
my
people are
gosh.
just doing whatever the heck they want with with ChatGPT, with content
Mhm.
creation, and like you have no control. You don't know what they're putting into it. You don't know what they're outputting into it. So I mean, it's kind of the Wild West, and that's the other place where we would come in from a WSI perspective, is help you set guidelines and guide rails around usage and
Mhm.
proper usage within the organization,
Yeah.
because you've got to educate your people. They're going to do what they want to do,
Mhm.
but if you don't tell them what they can and can't do, then they may put you in a position where you're, as an organization, you might be at risk. I think Samsung was the organization who recently, they had some people that were putting some proprietary designs into ChatGPT, and they got in
Mhm.
trouble for that, because now it's public, right? So
Sure. Very, that's really, really interesting. So, to kind of, I guess, full circle what we've been talking about, what do you think we can learn from the history of Lotus Notes and software and the development of these platforms,
yeah,
and apply it not only to today, but looking forward to the future? Because what I think, what I've learned from this conversation, and part of the reason I want to have it is, we see all the promise of all these new tools and developments, but also our methodologies and our mentalities and even our implementation tactics are the exact same,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
what do you think we can kind of take
Yeah.
away and think about into the future.
Oh, I think that's a great observation. I would use AI to say, let's think out of the box and how can we implement these in new ways and exciting ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, lessons learned. I mean, here's for me the key takeaways is at its core, collaboration is key no matter what technology
Mm-hmm.
that you produce.
Mm-hmm.
And what made Lotus Notes so sticky, and the reason that it's still around today, is the power of the platform and the applications and the ease of building the applications. Because I'm going to be honest, if you look at these applications that were built 20, 30 years ago, they look like 1990
Mm-hmm.
called and it wants its UI back. They look like crap. But you know what? They get the job done, and
Mm-hmm.
they've standed the test of time because it's like a Jeep. Like, you can beat it up and you can take it off it, but you know what you're getting at the end of the day, and it's going to take you from A to B. It's not going to look pretty. It's not a Mercedes. It's not flashy, but it's going to get you from A to B. So if you solve a problem and you help people and you do it in a collaborative manner, that's the most important lesson that I've learned from all of this,
Mm-hmm.
is like that's the key to being successful. And just you know get in, get sticky, and have a product that people can't live without, and then just constantly improve it. I mean, that's really what Lotus Notes has done. They just, who would have thought 30 years ago that this crazy little product, and if you look at the history of the company, it is really a cool and interesting company. Lotus, like as a company, the things that they did from a company perspective, not from a product perspective. The product's great, but like,
Mm-hmm.
just they were really, innovative in the way that they culture, the way that they embraced their people as well. So it's about the people and the
Mm-hmm.
product and collaboration, right? And if you've got that, then you can't lose. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a great point to close on is, Lotus at the beginning, such an innovative idea, but found kind of their sweet spot. And then even 30, 40 years later is still a product that's essential to their customers. And we look at companies like OpenAI and Anthropic today, and we're probably not thinking, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be using ChatGPT 30 years from now. We're thinking ChatGPT will be irrelevant and something else will be new. Well, as we can see with the adoption of ChatGPT, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of users they have now, but over 100. It's not unlikely that OpenAI is, bordering on the billion user mark or maybe more, and is essential to so many companies and organizations. And you think 30 years, that's a long time. I think Google's what, 25, 30 years old now,
Yeah.
and they're leading in the AI space
Yeah.
today. So it's really incredible. I love that point of what you can do is just getting in there and innovating and continuing to innovate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that, so, I do still follow a little bit, keep in contact with the Lotus stuff, and they're releasing June this month, and June 15th, they're releasing 14.5. I created the roadmap for three releases. I think it was like 11, 12, and 14. So this is their first post my
Wow.
roadmap release. And so they're incorporating an LLM into the product so that you can use the LLM in the Domino databases. So you've got your proprietary Domino data, and then you can use that also for email and things like that. So they're also embracing AI. So it's so interesting that now they've taken this old 30-year product that existed before the internet, before Google,
Yeah.
before AI, and now it's still around. Enterprises are still using it, and then they're just putting, the newest stuff into it. So, yeah, pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your insights with us, Barry.
Thanks.
Tell people where they can reach out and find you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, so just look me up on LinkedIn. I've got Facebook. If you search for Barry Rosen, WSI Houston, you'll find me. And my email address is barry.rosen@wsiworld.com. I'd love to chat about, either marketing or AI, how we can help you and your company learn more about AI.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time, Barry.
Thank you, Leon. Appreciate it.